The evening had settled into a soft amber glow when Arion finished tending to the crowds. People said he had healed a blind man, though Arion never used that word. He only smiled gently, as if the world misunderstood what it had just witnessed. While the villagers stayed behind whispering excitedly, he motioned quietly to three of his closest companions, Lisa, Merrick, and Naren. He didn't want the others following. He stepped away from the noise, choosing a narrow stone path that led up toward a ridge overlooking the valley. The air cooled with each step, and soon the chatter behind them faded into a distant hum. Arion walked slowly, hands relaxed, gaze drifting between the sky and the earth as though both were speaking to him at once. The three followed, unsure of why they had been singled out again. They had seen unusual things before, but something in Arion's calmness tonight suggested this was different. Not another lesson, not a parable. Something he had been waiting for the right moment to share. When they reached the ridge, Arion stopped. The horizon melted into warm colors, the last light of day painting gold across the hills. He turned toward them with an expression not of authority, but of quiet expectation, as though the next step belonged to them. "You think the man healed because I asked something divine to intervene," he said. His voice was low, steady, carrying effortlessly in the stillness. "But that's not what happened." Lisa exchanged a glance with Merrick. They had watched Arion simply place his hand on the man's shoulder, speak a single phrase of gratitude, and then the man claimed to see. It had all happened too gently to make sense. No grand gesture, no thunder. Just certainty. Arion sat on a smooth boulder, resting his hands loosely on his knees. "What you call a miracle," he continued, "was simply alignment. And I want you three to understand what alignment actually means, because it isn't reserved for prophets or holy men." Naren frowned slightly. "You mean, anyone could have done what you did?" Arion nodded. "Anyone who knows where they are inside themselves when they speak." The breeze stirred lightly, carrying the scent of wild sage. The valley below was becoming shadowed, but the ridge still held the last glimmer of sunlight, giving the scene an almost sacred clarity. Arion waited until they settled in front of him before continuing. "When I thanked the source earlier," he said, "I didn't ask. I didn't plead. I recognized." He tapped lightly over his chest, not the heart as a physical organ, but the space behind it. Recognition is different from belief. Belief hopes something is true. Recognition knows it already is. Merrick shifted, absorbing the words slowly. Arion always spoke in a way that stretched their minds without forcing them. Tonight, though, he sounded more direct, as if removing a veil they hadn't realized was still there. "You saw light around him," Arion said gently. "You told yourselves it was heavenly intervention. But the light wasn't coming from above. It was coming from him. The body responds to recognition by remembering what it actually is." Lisa blinked. "What it is, meaning soul. Meaning expression," Arion said. "The human form is the visible edge of something much larger. When it remembers the larger part, even briefly, the smaller part reorganizes. And what you call healing happens." The three sat silently, letting the meaning sink in. Arion's tone made it sound simple, not mystical, not esoteric. Just the way things were before people forgot. "I separated you three because you're ready to see the difference between performance and demonstration," he said. "I don't perform. I show. And tonight, I want to show you something you've never experienced consciously." The air thickened with anticipation. Arion stood again and motioned for them to rise. "First," he said, "drop out of thinking. Thinking won't help you here. Shift your awareness down from the head into the center of your chest. Not imagining it, feeling it." The three closed their eyes. Lisa felt warmth gather, Merrick felt only confusion at first, Naren felt a slight pressure, like a pulse he hadn't noticed before. "Good," Arion said softly. "Now breathe as though you're drawing the entire horizon into that center and letting it settle there. Don't force. Just invite." The sky darkened gradually, and a faint shimmer of stars began to appear. With each breath, something subtle changed in the atmosphere around them, a quiet that wasn't merely environmental but internal. A quiet that felt alive. Arion stepped closer to Lisa. "You're looking for something dramatic," he whispered, "but alignment rarely begins with drama. It begins with presence. Feel your weight on the earth. Feel how the ground holds you without condition." She exhaled, shoulders loosening. Then Arion stepped back, addressing all three at once. "The moment you stop identifying with the noise in your mind, something inside you becomes open. Not vulnerable, available. That availability is the doorway to the logos." Merrick opened one eye. "Logos, like divine order." "Not the word," Arion corrected. "The vibration beneath the word. A field that knows exactly what you are before you learn to doubt it." He raised his hands slowly, not in blessing but as if to attune them to something they couldn't yet perceive. "When I touched the man earlier, I wasn't channeling power. I was acknowledging connection. My certainty wasn't mine alone. It came from the same field that shaped him, you, and every breath of wind on this ridge." Arion's voice softened further. "When you recognize the field recognizes you. Alignment is mutual." A long pause followed. The ridge grew darker, but Arion seemed illuminated by the last strands of dying sunlight. The three disciples felt a subtle warmth expand through their chests, nothing overwhelming, but undeniably real. "You felt it just now," Arion said. "A shift. Small, but unmistakable. That shift is the first step toward seeing who you truly are beneath the layers taught to you by fear, culture, and memory." He paced slowly in front of them, his outline blending with the twilight. "I didn't bring you here to witness another miracle," he continued. "I brought you here because what happened today wasn't a miracle at all. It was a lesson, one you were meant to learn, not merely observe." The wind settled. Silence hovered like a waiting presence. Arion's gaze sharpened gently. "Everything I do in front of crowds is for them. What I do with you is for what comes next." He let that sentence rest in the air, heavy with implication. "You think I lead you," he whispered, "but I'm preparing you to walk without needing me." A distant lantern flickered in the valley below, reminding them of the world they would eventually return to. For now, though, the ridge felt like a threshold, one they had crossed unknowingly but could not uncross now that Arion had spoken. Lisa swallowed, her voice barely audible. "What happens next?" Arion smiled softly, as though her question was the very beginning he had been waiting for. "That," he said, "is what we will explore tomorrow. Tonight, let your awareness stay where it is. Don't force understanding. Let it unfold." He turned back toward the path, expecting them to follow. And they did, quietly, each carrying the weight of a truth they had only begun to touch. The next morning, the valley was washed in pale gold as Arion led Lisa, Merrick, and Naren toward an abandoned stone orchard house on the hillside. Dew clung to the grass, catching light like tiny prisms. None of them had slept deeply, each had felt something stirring during the night, a quiet insistence beneath their thoughts, as though the ridge had left an imprint on their inner world. Arion paused at the doorway of the old structure, running his hand along the weathered stones. "This place," he murmured, "was built before anyone living remembers. The people who raised these walls understood the logos without ever naming it." He stepped inside, inviting them to follow. Sunbeams pierced through cracks in the roof, illuminating dust that floated like drifting light. The house felt still, but not abandoned, more like a silent witness to forgotten knowledge. "Sit," Arion said. They formed a loose circle around him on the smooth floor. "Yesterday I told you that alignment is recognition. Today, we go deeper." His voice flowed softer than usual, as though he was speaking directly to the pulse beneath their ribs. "Logos is often described as divine speech," he said, "but that phrase misleads people. It isn't language. It's structure and awareness woven together. The moment you recognize it, even faintly, your perception meets a reality that has been holding you since before birth. Lisa frowned thoughtfully. So Logos is a kind of living order. Arion nodded. Not order as in rules. Order as in coherence. A pattern that holds all other patterns. It's the rhythm that breathes through every leaf, every star, every heartbeat. Naren leaned forward. And that's what you aligned with yesterday? I didn't align yesterday, Arion replied gently. Alignment is not a moment. It's a posture of being. What you saw was its expression. He waited a moment, letting the distinction settle. People imagine the source as something above them, unreachable. But the monad isn't above or outside. It's underlying. Constant. Closer than your breath. The only barrier is identification, your mind choosing the smaller self and forgetting the larger field. Merrick rubbed his palms on his knees. And the demiurge you mentioned once, how does that fit? Arion took a slow breath before answering. Not a monster. Not an enemy. A counterfeiter. A force that takes the resonance of Logos and bends it toward fear, scarcity, and obedience. It cannot create, it can only distort. His voice carried neither hatred nor judgment, only clarity. If Logos is the open sky, the demiurge is the fog that convinces you the sky is gone. The three absorbed the analogy quietly. Arion lowered his gaze, as though listening to something they couldn't hear. Most people live in that fog their entire lives. They follow inherited fears, inherited beliefs, inherited shame. They never question the voice that whispers they are small and unworthy. But that voice is not part of them. It's an echo inside the fog. He lifted his head again and looked at each of them in turn. This is why alignment matters. When you enter the heart center and recognize the field, the fog loses its power. Distortions cannot survive in recognition. Lisa felt a subtle trembling in her chest. Is that why your voice sounded so certain yesterday? Like it wasn't yours. Arion's eyes warmed. It was mine. But not only mine. When you speak from recognition, the Logos speaks with you, not as a possession, but as a resonance. Certainty is the natural tone of coherence. He gestured for them to place their hands over their chests. Now, feel again for the center we touched yesterday, he instructed. Not the beating heart, but the awareness behind it. The stillness that notices your thoughts without becoming them. Their breaths eased. Merrick felt the familiar confusion again, the mind resisting. Lisa felt warmth. Naren felt pressure. All right, Arion said calmly. Now we go further. Instead of breathing into the center, listen from the center. Let your awareness stretch outward like invisible threads touching everything around you, the dust in the air, the stones beneath us, the breeze entering through the broken wall. They inhaled slowly. Naren's brow relaxed. Lisa's fingertips tingled. Marek's breathing deepened involuntarily. Good, Arion whispered. When you listen from the heart center, you begin to sense the subtle hum that surrounds all forms, the resonance that comes before thought. That is the Logos. The air in the orchard house shifted. Not warmer, not colder, just denser, as though the space itself was leaning closer to them. Arion continued in almost a whisper, now comes the recognition. Silent, simple. No words. He tapped the center of his chest again. Just notice that the awareness you're feeling is not personal. It isn't yours or mine. It's shared. Singular. The monad expressing through many points. Merrick swallowed hard. I think I feel something. But it's faint. That's enough, Arion said gently. Logos doesn't rush. If a child touches the ocean for the first time, the ocean doesn't become smaller because the child only touched the surface. Silence filled the house like a soft tide. Even the dust seemed to settle. After a long moment, Arion stood up. Now, open your eyes. The three did, and something subtle had shifted in the room. The sunlight looked sharper. Colors deeper. As if the world had taken one slow breath along with them. Naren blinked repeatedly. Everything looks clearer. Arion nodded. When the mind quiets, the fog thins. He walked toward a half-collapsed wall and placed his palm against the stone. Yesterday, you saw alignment from the outside. Today, you felt its beginning from the inside. Then he turned toward them, expression soft but serious. Tomorrow, you'll learn the part most people fear, why the fog resists clarity. Merrick straightened. You mean the distortions? The archonic impulse, Arion said quietly. A distraction, a distortion, a pull. Not beings as people imagine, but patterns that hijack attention. They cannot enter recognition, so they prevent recognition by keeping you busy, reactive, and fragmented. The room darkened slightly as clouds drifted across the sun. I will show you how to move through them without conflict or fear, Arion said. But for today, rest. Let what you felt settle. Coherence grows in stillness. He motioned them toward the exit. The orchard outside glowed in afternoon light, branches casting long shadows across the grass. As they walked back down the hillside, none of them spoke. There was nothing to say, the quiet inside them felt full enough. The following dawn arrived veiled in silver mist. The valley below looked like a sea of drifting clouds, and the ridge stood like an island rising above it. Arion led Lisa, Merrick, and Naren back to the same ridge where their first lesson began. The air was colder, sharper, as though the world itself sensed what was coming. None of them knew exactly what Arion intended to teach today, but each felt a slight heaviness in the chest, a mixture of anticipation and something that felt almost like gravity. Arion moved with unusual stillness. Even his footsteps were quieter. When he reached the top, he turned to face them, his expression soft but solemn. You felt the edge of recognition yesterday, he said. Now you'll understand why most people never cross it. He lifted his hand slightly, letting the morning wind brush past his palm. There is a resistance built into the world, Arion continued. Not as punishment, not as evil in the way people speak of evil, but as a distortion. A warping of perception. This distortion is what ancient teachers personified as Archons. Naren stepped forward. So they're real? Not as monsters, Arion replied. Not as creatures lurking in shadows. They are patterns, feedback loops made of fear, confusion, urgency, and self-doubt. They attach themselves to the unexamined mind, not by force, but by familiarity. He gestured between them. Your mind favors what feels familiar, even if it hurts. And the archonic impulse uses that. A cloud drifted across the sun, casting long shadows over the ridge. The silence around them felt heavier now, not oppressive, but dense with meaning. Arion continued softly, when people begin to approach recognition, when they feel the truth behind their ribs, the distortion tightens. It creates distractions, impulses, anxieties. Not because it is powerful, but because it is afraid of being seen. He stepped closer to them. When I taught you to sense the logos, there was no resistance. But now, try to feel the center again. The three closed their eyes. Almost instantly, they felt something different from the previous day. Lisa felt her thoughts racing, even though nothing was wrong. Merrick felt a sudden impatience, like he needed to leave. Naren felt doubts rising, small, sharp whispers telling him he was imagining everything. Arion watched their reactions with calm understanding. That, he said quietly, is the archonic pull. Merrick opened his eyes, breathing quickly. It feels unpleasant. Distortion often does, Arion said. But you don't fight it. You don't push it away. Pushing strengthens it. Fighting feeds it. He stepped behind them and spoke gently, almost like a lullaby. Instead, you recognize it. You notice it without becoming it. Just as you did with your thoughts yesterday. His voice guided them back into stillness. When doubt speaks, don't answer it. When fear rises, don't suppress it. When urgency screams, don't obey. Let each pattern appear, and watch it the way you would watch a passing cloud. They tried again. Lisa focused on the warmth in her chest. Merrick softened his breathing. Naren relaxed his shoulders. Gradually, the agitation loosened. Arion nodded with approval. Good. The distortion only survives when you mistake it for your own voice. He walked toward the edge of the ridge and motioned for them to join him. The mist below began to break apart, revealing the valley in slow, rolling waves. Now, he said, you'll learn the final step. The one that allows you to speak as I spoke the day of the healing. They stood beside him in silence, waiting. When you are aligned, Arion said, your words carry coherence. That coherence organizes the world around you, not through power, not through force, but through resonance. The fog cannot oppose resonance. It can only obscure it. The wind stirred again. Birds rose from the trees below, their wings cutting through swirls of mist. Arion turned to face them fully, his presence calm and grounded. I will show you the sequence. It isn't magic. It isn't ritual. It's recognition expressed through language. He raised his hand to his chest. First, stillness. Feel the center behind your ribs. They breathed in. Second, recognition. Notice the field, not as belief, but as awareness. Their breaths softened. Third, certainty. Speak from the center, not the mind. He looked each of them in the eyes. And fourth, release. Do not cling to the outcome. Alignment isn't control, it's participation. He stepped back and motioned toward a wilted branch on the ground. Lisa, Arion said gently, touch the branch. She knelt beside it, fingertips brushing the dry wood. Remain in recognition, Arion instructed. Let the fog stay where it is. Speak only from the center. Lisa inhaled slowly, touching the warmth behind her ribs. A faint shimmer rose around her awareness, not visible, but unmistakable. She whispered softly, thank you for what you already are. Nothing dramatic happened. No flash of light. But the branch shifted, its color deepening slightly, as though moisture stirred within it. Naren gasped. Merrick blinked. Lisa withdrew her hand in disbelief. Arion smiled. Not a miracle. A coherence response. He placed his hand on Lisa's shoulder. And you did it. She looked stunned. But it was so small. So was your recognition, Arion replied warmly. The Logos does not measure size. It responds to clarity. He moved to stand between the three of them. This is the part the crowds are never ready for. This is why I bring you aside. What the world calls power is simply alignment unhindered by distortion. The ridge brightened again as the sun broke free of the clouds. Arion's voice carried through the stillness with gentle finality. You are ready now, not because you understand everything, but because you recognized something real inside yourself. Walk with that. Return to it. Let it guide you. He gazed out over the valley. When I am gone from your sight, this is what will remain. A long silence followed, filled with meaning none of them could put into words. They felt different, expanded, steadied, softened. As though the ridge had become a threshold they had finally crossed. Arion turned to them one last time. It begins with stillness. It ends with certainty. And in between is recognition. They bowed their heads, not out of reverence, but gratitude. Then they walked back down the ridge together, quiet, changed, and carrying the resonance of something that felt both ancient and newly awakened. As we step back from this story, it becomes clear that what Arion shared with his three companions was never meant to stay on a lonely ridge or inside an abandoned orchard house. The heart of his teaching, recognition, alignment, coherence, belongs to anyone willing to pause long enough to feel what lives beneath the noise. The world will always offer distraction, distortion, and fear. It will always whisper urgency, doubt, and the pressure to shrink yourself into familiar patterns. But the quiet space behind your ribs, the one Arion guided them toward, is available in every moment you remember to look. This tale wasn't created to convince you of supernatural gifts or hidden powers. It was offered as an exploration of what becomes possible when awareness slows, breath deepens, and identity softens into something wider and more connected. In your own life, recognition won't always look like healing or sudden clarity. Sometimes it appears as a single calm breath when everything feels chaotic. Sometimes it shows up as choosing patience instead of reaction, or gentleness instead of fear. And if this story resonated with you, if it stirred even a small sense of stillness or curiosity about what lies beneath your thoughts, then let it stay with you. Let it unfold in its own timing, just as Arion asked his companions to let it unfold for them. If you enjoyed this video and want more stories exploring ancient wisdom, hidden teachings, and the deeper layers of consciousness, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss upcoming releases. If something in this touched you, please leave a like. It helps this channel grow and reach others who might need these messages. And if you know someone who would connect with this story, feel free to share it with them.